The first thing I registered wasn't the pain in my hip or the gasp that sucked the air out of the dining room. It was the sound of my own crystal wine glass shattering against the imported Italian tile, shard by shard, just like my patience. I was on the floor, actually physically on the floor of the dining room in the house that my father built, the house I paid the mortgage on, looking up at the underside of the mahogany table. I could smell the roast beef, a prime rib roast that had cost me $300, and the faint, cloying scent of my stepdad's cheap cologne. I said, "Get up, Bianca," Richard snarled. His face was flushed, a map of broken capillaries and expensive scotch. "Tiffany is here. She needs a seat. This is a family dinner, and she is my real daughter." I looked up. The room was spinning slightly, not from alcohol, I hadn't had a drop, but from the sheer, unadulterated shock of physics. A 200-pound man had just shoved me, his 32-year-old stepdaughter, out of a chair because his biological daughter had finally decided to show up, 2 hours late. Tiffany stood in the archway, dripping in fake fur and real attitude. She was holding 4 shopping bags from Saks Fifth Avenue, despite claiming last week she couldn't afford gas money to visit her grandmother. She looked at me on the floor, blew a bubble with her gum, and smirked. "God, Bianca," she drawled, dropping her bags on the sideboard I had just polished. "Stop being so dramatic. It's just a chair." But it wasn't just a chair. It was the head of the table. My father's seat, the seat I had taken over after the funeral 5 years ago. My eyes darted to the other end of the table, to Mom. This is the part that haunts me. This is the part that wakes me up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat. If Richard was the hammer, my mother was the anvil. "Mom," I whispered. My voice sounded small, pathetic. I hated it. Eleanor, the woman who had birthed me, the woman I had spent the last 5 years protecting from the harsh realities of widowhood, looked at me. Then she looked at Richard. I saw the calculation in her eyes. It wasn't fear. It was convenience. She adjusted her pearl necklace, the one Dad gave her for their 25th anniversary, and picked up her fork. "Bianca, please," she said, her voice trembling with a feigned fragility. "Just find a stool in the kitchen. Richard is stressed. You know how he gets during the holidays." A stool in the kitchen, like a naughty child, like the help. I looked around the table, 23 people, aunts, cousins, friends of the family. Most of them were staring at their plates, terrified to make eye contact with Richard. He held the purse strings of the family trust, or at least he thought he did, and nobody wanted to be cut off. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a red light. Uncle Mike, my dad's younger brother. He was sitting 3 seats down, his phone propped up against a gravy boat. He wasn't eating. He was filming. He caught my eye and gave the tiniest, almost imperceptible nod. "I got it," his eyes said. I slowly pushed myself up. My hip throbbed. I was wearing a tailored Chanel suit, appropriate for the CFO of a logistics company, and now there was a run in my stocking and dust on my knees. "You want me to leave the table?" I asked, my voice steadying. The coldness was starting to set in, that specific, icy clarity that comes right before you destroy a competitor in a boardroom. Richard laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "I want you to know your place. You're just the accountant, Bianca. You're lucky I let you work at my company. Now move. Tiffany, sweetie, come sit down. Daddy saved you the best spot." He gestured to the chair. My chair. Tiffany pranced over, kicking my purse out of the way with her heel. She sat down, preening, and immediately reached for the wine bottle. "Thanks, Daddy. You're the best." Bianca always takes up so much space. I stood there for a heartbeat longer. I looked at the roast I had bought, the decorations I had hung, the people I had supported financially for half a decade. "Okay," I said. Richard blinked, surprised I hadn't started screaming. He wanted a fight. He wanted me to be the hysterical, ungrateful stepdaughter so he could play the long-suffering patriarch. Okay, he repeated suspiciously. You're right, Richard, I said, smoothing down my blazer. It is a family dinner, and I think I've overstayed my welcome. I turned to my mother. Enjoy the meal, Mom. I hope it's worth it. She didn't look up. She was busy cutting her meat, her knuckles white. I turned around and walked toward the foyer. Behind me, I heard Richard boom, "Good riddance." Maybe now we can have some peace and quiet without Miss High and Mighty looking down her nose at us. Laughter. Nervous, sycophantic laughter followed him. I reached the heavy oak front door. My hand hovered over the brass handle. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my mind was a spreadsheet, and the numbers weren't adding up for Richard anymore. He thought he had won. He thought he had humiliated me. He thought that by physically removing me from the table, he had removed me from the equation. He didn't know that in my purse I had the access key to the server room. He didn't know that the accountant he just shoved onto the floor was the only person who knew where the bodies were buried, financially speaking. I opened the door. The winter wind bit my face, sharp and cleansing. "Get out," he had said. "Be careful what you wish for, Richard." I stepped out into the snow, the heavy door clicking shut behind me. It sounded like the closing of a vault. The time for being the good daughter was over. The time for the audit had begun. The drive away from the estate was a blur of Christmas lights and dark wooded roads. I didn't turn on the radio. I needed the silence to organize the rage that was boiling in my gut. It hadn't always been like this. 5 years ago, this family was different. My father, James, was a giant of a man, not just in stature, but in spirit. He built Sterling Logistics from a single truck into a multi-state empire. He taught me everything. How to read a balance sheet, how to spot a liar by their shoes, and most importantly, how to protect the people you love. "Bianca," he told me on his deathbed, his hand frail in mine, "promise me you'll look after your mother. She has a soft heart. She needs a strong anchor. That's you, kiddo. You're the anchor." I promised, and that promise became the noose around my neck. 6 months after the funeral, Richard appeared. He met Mom at a grief support group at the church. Classic predator behavior. He was charming, I'll give him that. He wore suits that fit just a little too well and told stories about his investments in tech startups that nobody had ever heard of. I saw through him immediately. I saw the way his eyes lingered on the antique silver in our dining room, not with appreciation, but with appraisal. I saw how he ordered the most expensive wine at dinner, but conveniently forgot his wallet. "He makes me happy, Bianca," Mom had cried when I voiced my concerns. "Why can't you just let me be happy? Your father is gone. Do you want me to be alone forever?" So I backed off, for her. Then came the wedding, a small affair that ballooned into a $50,000 spectacle because Richard wanted to give Eleanor the day she deserved. I paid for it, out of my salary, because Richard's assets were temporarily tied up in offshore accounts. Then came Tiffany, Richard's daughter from his second, or was it third marriage? She moved into the guest house just for a few weeks while she looked for a job. That was 3 years ago. The invasion was subtle at first, a drip, drip, drip of poison. Richard convinced Mom that he should be COO of Sterling Logistics. "It's a man's world, Eleanor," he'd say. "Bianca is brilliant with numbers, but she doesn't have the presence to deal with the unions. Let me handle the heavy lifting. Let her stay in finance where she's safe." Mom, in her grief-stricken fog, signed the papers appointing him acting COO. I was demoted to CFO. I swallowed my pride. I told myself it didn't matter who sat in the big chair as long as the company survived. But then, the spending started. I remembered the day I found the invoice for a Porsche Cayenne. "Company car," Richard had shrugged, feet up on my father's desk. "For who?" I asked, holding the paper that shook in my hands. "You already have the Mercedes, and we have a fleet of trucks to maintain." "It's for Tiffany," he said, not even looking up from his phone. "She's starting a consulting role. She needs to project the right image." "Consulting?" I laughed, a bitter, jagged sound. "Richard, Tiffany dropped out of community college because she said the parking lot was too confusing. What is she consulting on?" "Lifestyle branding," he said. "And watch your tone, Bianca. You're speaking to the CEO." I went to Mom. I showed her the numbers. I showed her that our operating margins were shrinking because Richard was using the company credit card for trips to Vegas, networking dinners that cost $5,000, and client gifts that were clearly jewelry for Tiffany. Mom just sighed, looking out the window. "He's trying so hard, Bianca. He feels like you don't respect him. Maybe if we support him, he'll settle down. We have plenty of money. Your father left us so much. Dad left that money for the business, Mom, for the employees' pensions, for your retirement." "Stop it," she snapped, turning on me with a ferocity I had never seen before. "You sound just like a lawyer. You're so cold, Bianca, just like your father was at the end. Richard is family. We share. We share." I gripped the steering wheel of my modest sedan, a car I bought used because I was putting half my salary back into the company to cover their spending. They called me the ATM. They called me the Bank of Bianca. When the roof needed fixing, call Bianca. When Tiffany got a DUI, call Bianca for the lawyer fees. When Richard's investments tanked, call Bianca to transfer funds. I was the provider. I was the fixer. And tonight, I was the trash they threw out because I took up too much space. I thought about the college fund Dad had set up for his future grandchildren. My children. Last month, I noticed the balance was zero. Richard said it was a reallocation of assets for a high-yield opportunity. I knew then. I knew he was draining us dry, but I needed proof. Hard, undeniable proof. I pulled my car to the side of the road. My hands were shaking. I looked at the dashboard clock. 8:15 p.m., Christmas Eve. Most people were opening gifts. Most people were drinking eggnog. I picked up my phone. I had one contact saved under "Do not call unless emergency." Mr. Henderson, my father's personal attorney. The man Richard had fired on his second day as CEO because Henderson was too old school. I dialed. It rang once, twice. "Bianca?" His voice was raspy, surprised. "Merry Christmas, dear. Is everything all right?" "No, Mr. Henderson," I said, staring at the snow falling on my windshield. "It's not. They pushed me." "They what?" "Richard. He physically pushed me. Mom did nothing. I'm done, Arthur. I'm done being the anchor. I want to sink the ship." There was a long silence on the other end. Then I heard the rustle of papers. "I've been waiting for this call for 3 years, Bianca," Henderson said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Where are you?" "I'm on Route 9. Meet me at my office, the downtown one, not the firm, my private practice." "It's Christmas Eve, Arthur." "Exactly," he said. "The best time to catch a thief is when he thinks everyone is sleeping. And Bianca, bring your laptop, the old one, the one James gave you." I looked at the passenger seat where my laptop bag sat. "I have it." "Good, because there's something about your father's will, the real will, that you don't know. Richard thinks he's playing chess, honey, but your father invented the game." I hung up. I put the car in gear. The tears I had been holding back evaporated. I wasn't sad anymore. I was executed. The downtown district was a ghost town. Christmas lights reflected off the wet pavement, creating a kaleidoscope of red and green that felt mocked my mood. I parked in the alley behind Henderson's building. It was a gritty brick structure that had survived 3 recessions, much like Mr. Henderson himself. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. I pulled it out as I walked to the service elevator. A notification from the bank. Alert. Transaction declined. Amount, $12,500. Merchant, the Sapphire Gentlemen's Club. Card ending in 4490. Card 4490. That was the emergency corporate card I carried. But I had it right. I checked my wallet. It was gone. Richard. He must have swiped it from my purse while I was setting the table, before the incident. Or maybe Tiffany grabbed it when she kicked my bag. It didn't matter. What mattered was that less than an hour after throwing me out, Richard was at a strip club trying to drop 12 grand on my credit. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive. I opened the banking app. My fingers flew across the screen. I didn't just freeze the card. I flagged the transaction as fraud. Then I went a step further. I lowered the daily spending limit on the main operating account, the one Richard used for his business dinners, to $50. Merry Christmas, Dad, I whispered to the screen. Enjoy your Happy Meal. The elevator dinged. Mr. Henderson was waiting for me at his door, wearing a moth-eaten cardigan and holding a mug of steaming tea. He looked like a kind grandfather, but I knew better. This was the man who once negotiated a union contract by staring at the rep for 4 hours without blinking. You look like hell, kid, he said, ushering me in. I feel like I just woke up from a 5-year coma, I replied, walking into his office. It smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. It smelled like safety. Sit, he commanded, pointing to a leather chair. Tell me exactly what happened. Don't leave anything out. The law lives in the details. So I told him. I told him about the insults, the exclusion, the Porsche, the depleted college fund, and finally, the shove. When I described Mom's silence, Henderson's face hardened. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Eleanor, he sighed. James always worried about her spine. He loved her, but he knew she was pliable. She chose him, Arthur. She chose the parasite over her own daughter. She chose survival, or what she thinks is survival. Fear makes people do ugly things. He stood up and walked to a wall safe hidden behind a framed map of the city. But fear also makes people careless. He spun the dial. Click, click, click. He pulled out a thick manila envelope and a small silver flash drive. You think you're here because you want to sue him for assault, Henderson said, or maybe for wrongful termination if he tries to fire you. I want him out, I said, leaning forward. I want him out of the company, out of the house, out of our lives. I built Sterling Logistics back up from the brink of bankruptcy while he played CEO. I own the operational success. I want what's mine. Henderson smiled, a wolfish grin. You don't just own the success, Bianca. You own everything. I frowned. What do you mean? Mom and Richard have the majority share. Dad left Mom 60%. I only have 40%. That's what the public will says, the one filed in probate court 5 years ago, Henderson said. He tapped the manila envelope. But your father was paranoid. In the last months, when the cancer went to his brain, he had moments of extreme clarity. He saw Richard circling Eleanor even then, at the church picnics while James was still alive. My stomach dropped. He knew? He suspected. So we created a failsafe, a honeypot clause embedded in the trust that holds the company's shares. Henderson slid the envelope toward me. The 60% share meant for your mother was never a direct transfer. It was a conditional life estate. Basically, she gets the income from the shares, but she doesn't own the voting rights unless she remains unmarried and the company maintains a certain profit margin. I scanned the document. Legalese danced before my eyes, but the bold print jumped out. Upon the remarriage of Eleanor Sterling, all voting rights and underlying equity of the Class A shares revert immediately to the beneficiary, Bianca Sterling. I gasped, but she married Richard 3 years ago. Why didn't this trigger then? Because, Henderson said, his eyes twinkling, James wanted to give your mother a chance. He added a clause that said the reversion only happens if the beneficiary, you, formally files a motion of competence, proving the company is being mismanaged. Or what? Or if the new spouse attempts to liquidate assets or harm a blood heir. Harm a blood heir? I touched my hip. It was throbbing. He pushed me, I whispered. Assault, Henderson confirmed. Physical harm. And we have witnesses? Uncle Mike, he filmed it. Beautiful, Henderson clapped his hands together. But there's more. The house. Mom owns the house. Dad left it to her. He left her the right to reside. The deed? The deed was transferred to a shell LLC called Phoenix Properties 3 days before James died. Henderson pointed to the bottom of the page. Phoenix Properties. Sole member, Bianca Sterling. I stared at the paper. The air left my lungs. I own the house? You've owned it for 5 years. Richard has been living in your house, driving your company into the ground, and spending your future inheritance, all while treating you like a tenant? Why didn't you tell me? I demanded, tears springing to my eyes. Why did I suffer for 5 years? Because James made me swear, Henderson said softly. He wanted you to toughen up. He said, Bianca has a good heart, like her mother. If you give her this power too soon, she'll just hand it over to Eleanor, and Eleanor will hand it to the next shark that swims by. Bianca needs to find her teeth first. He looked at me. Did you find them, Bianca? I thought about the floor, the roast beef, the look on Tiffany's face. I found them, I said. Good, because what comes next isn't just a legal battle, it's a war. Richard has leveraged the company. He's in deep with some bad people, loans that don't appear on the official books. If we pull the rug out now, he won't just be homeless, he'll be exposed. Exposed for what? For fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement. Henderson pushed the silver flash drive toward me. Your father installed a back door in the company server, a legacy protocol. It records every keystroke, every deleted email, every shadow transaction. It's all on the main server, but you need the key. He pointed to the drive. This is the key, but you have to plug it into the main terminal at the house, tonight. I looked at the drive. It was small, cold metal. It was the weapon my father had left me from the grave. He thinks I'm gone, I said, a plan forming in my mind. He thinks I'm crying in a motel room somewhere. Exactly, Henderson said. Go back, get into the office, run the protocol, get the receipts. Once we have the data proving he's stealing, combined with the assault, we don't just evict him, we bury him. I stood up. I felt 10 feet tall. One thing, Arthur, I said, pausing at the door. Can I draft an eviction notice while I'm here? Henderson grinned, pulling a fresh legal pad from his drawer. I thought you'd never ask. The drive back to the estate felt like a covert military operation. The snow had stopped, leaving the world silent and white, a blank canvas waiting for blood. I parked my car a quarter-mile down the road, hidden behind a cluster of pines. I didn't want Richard to see headlights. I walked the rest of the way, the icy wind biting through my thin stockings, but I didn't feel the cold. I was fueled by pure adrenaline. The house was blazing with light. I could hear music, loud, thumping bass that rattled the expensive windows. Tiffany's playlist. They were partying. They were celebrating my exile. I slipped around the back toward the servants' entrance near the kitchen. I still had my key. I prayed Richard hadn't changed the locks in the last 2 hours. The key turned. Click. I slid inside. The kitchen was a disaster zone. Plates with half-eaten food were piled high. Wine bottles were overturned. It looked like a frat house, not a multi-million-dollar residence. I could hear them in the living room. "To the future," Richard was shouting, his voice slurring. "To trimming the fat." "To the fat," Tiffany screeched, followed by the clinking of glasses. I crept down the hallway, sticking to the shadows. My father's office, now Richard's command center, was on the ground floor, opposite the living room. I had to time it perfectly. I waited for a burst of laughter, then dashed across the corridor and slipped into the office, closing the door softly behind me. The room smelled of stale cigar smoke. It made me nauseous. Richard had replaced Dad's classic oak furniture with modern glass and chrome monstrosities. It looked cold, sterile. I moved to the desk. The main terminal was there, a massive dual monitor setup. I sat in the chair, my chair, essentially, and woke the computer. Password required. Of course. I tried the obvious ones. Richard 1. Money. Boss. Incorrect. 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 My hands started to sweat. If I locked the system, an alert would go to his phone. Think, Bianca, what does a narcissist love more than money? Himself, or his real legacy. I typed, Tiffany 1. Access granted. I almost laughed out loud. Pathetic. I pulled the silver flash drive Henderson gave me out of my pocket. My hand trembled slightly as I inserted it into the USB port. A black window popped up on the screen. Green text began to scroll rapidly. Legacy protocol initiated. Searching for anomalies. It was running. Now I just had to wait. I looked around the desk while the progress bar crawled. 10%, 20%. I opened the top drawer. It was filled with unopened letters, red stamps, final notice, past due, IRS audit warning. I flipped through them. Unpaid property taxes, unpaid vendor invoices, and then something that made my blood run cold. A letter from a loan shark, Vegas Mike. Mr. Sterling, or should I say Mr. Imposter, you're 2 weeks late. The vigorish is now 20%. I don't care about your stepdaughter's trust fund. Pay up or we start taking fingers. Tell Tiffany hello. I took a photo of the letter with my phone. So Tiffany wasn't just a spoiled brat. She was the bait, or the leverage. Richard was gambling away the company to pay for debts incurred by whom? Or were they both in on it? Beep. The computer screen flashed. Download complete. 4,500 files retrieved. I pulled the drive out. I had it. I had the smoking gun. But then, the door handle turned. I dove under the heavy mahogany desk just as the door swung open. I'm telling you, I heard something. Tiffany's voice, whiny, annoying. It's the wind, Tiff. Or maybe the ghost of old man Sterling coming to haunt me. Ha! They walked into the room. I could see their shoes. Richard's Italian loafers, bought with company funds, and Tiffany's glittery heels. Daddy, are you sure Bianca can't touch the money? Tiffany asked. She sounded anxious. I really need that 50 grand for the, investment project. Relax, Richard said. I heard the clink of a glass hitting the desk right above my head. Bianca is a mouse. She'll squeak, but she won't bite. Besides, your stepmother signed the new power of attorney yesterday. My breath hitched. Power of attorney? She signed it, Tiffany squealed. Does she know what it means? Eleanor, please. I told her it was insurance paperwork for the house. She didn't even read it. With that document, I can liquidate her 60% share of the company without her permission. We can cash out, Tiff. We can take the money and move to Costa Rica before the IRS catches up. I bit my knuckle to keep from screaming. He wasn't just stealing, he was planning to gut the company, leave Mom destitute, and flee the country. What about Bianca? Tiffany asked. Let her have the shell, Richard laughed. She loves this company so much. She can have the debts. She can have the lawsuits. We'll be gone by New Year's. The cruelty was so casual, so mundane. Come on, Richard said. Let's go open the good champagne, the 98 Dom. I think Bianca was saving it for her wedding, but since she's going to die an old maid, we might as well drink it. They walked out. I stayed under the desk for a full 5 minutes, shaking. Not from fear this time, from pure, unadulterated hatred. He was going to destroy everything my father built. He was going to leave my mother with nothing but debt and a broken heart. I crawled out, I grabbed the flash drive, I took the stack of unpaid bills. I looked at the computer screen one last time. I opened the email client, I found the draft folder. I typed a quick email to the entire company directory, all 500 employees, the board, the vendors. Subject: urgent, mandatory all-hands meeting, December 26th, 9 a.m. From Office of the CEO, location, main conference room. Agenda: the future of Sterling Logistics. I scheduled it to send at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Then I opened a second window. I logged in to the HR portal. As CFO, I still had admin rights. I navigated to Richard's profile. Status: active. I hovered over the terminate button. No, I thought, not yet. I want to do this to his face. I slipped out of the office, back into the shadows. I had the receipts, I had the confession, witnessed by my own ears, and I had the will to kill. I walked back to my car in the snow. The silence of the night felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was expectant. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Mom, please apologize to Richard tomorrow. We can fix this. I looked at the message. I didn't reply. We are going to fix this, Mom, I said to the cold air, but you're not going to like the repair bill. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I spent the night in a 24-hour diner near Henderson's office, nursing black coffee and dissecting the data from the flash drive. It was worse than I thought. It wasn't just embezzlement. It was a slaughter. Richard had set up 3 shell companies, Titan Consulting, Blue Wave Imports, and TMS Holdings, Tiffany Marie Sterling. He wasn't even subtle. Every month, Sterling Logistics paid these companies retainer fees ranging from $20,000 to $50,000 for services like strategic visioning and market analysis. The invoices were fake. I could see the metadata. They were all created on the same day, in batch, by Tiffany's laptop. But the real knife in the heart was the mortgage documents. I found a scanned PDF in a hidden folder labeled House Funds. It was a second mortgage on the estate, $500,000, taken out 6 months ago. And there, at the bottom, was the signature, Eleanor Sterling. It wasn't forged. I knew my mother's signature, the loops in the L's, the shaky S. She had signed it. I stared at the screen, the neon light of the diner flickering overhead. Why? Why would she mortgage the house Dad built, the house that was supposed to be mortgage-free? Then I saw the email attached to the PDF, from Richard to the bank officer. Subject: re-loan approval. My wife is on board. She understands this capital is necessary to pay for her daughter's legal issues. Please expedite. My legal issues? I didn't have legal issues. He had lied to her. He had told Mom I was in trouble, that I needed money, and convinced her to sign away the equity to save me. You sick son of a... I slammed my fist on the table, rattling the silverware. The waitress looked over, concerned. "Bad night, honey?" she asked, pouring more coffee. "You have no idea," I muttered, "but it's about to be a great morning." I had enough. I had the fraud, I had the manipulation, but I needed one more piece of the puzzle. The power of attorney Richard mentioned. If he used that to liquidate the company today, before I could file the injunction, everything would be lost. It was 6 a.m., Christmas Day. My phone started blowing up. Richard, 5 missed calls. Tiffany, 3 missed calls. Mom, 10 missed calls. They must have woken up. They must have realized the credit cards were dead. I opened the voicemail from Richard. I put it on speaker. "Bianca, what the hell do you think you're doing? My card was declined at the gas station." "Do you know how embarrassing that is? You unfreeze these accounts immediately, or so help me God, I will have security drag you out of your office by your hair. Call me." I saved the voicemail. Evidence of threat. Then a text from Tiffany. "You ruined Christmas, you jealous bitch. Daddy is going to sue you." I smiled. Screenshot. I needed to act fast. I called Henderson. "Arthur, wake up. I have the proof. He mortgaged the house, he's funneling money to shell companies, and he tricked Mom into signing a POA. "Meet me at the courthouse," Henderson said, his voice instantly alert. "I know a judge who owes me a favor. We can get an emergency injunction even on Christmas." "I'm going to the office first," I said. "I need to physically secure the server." If he realizes I have the data, he might try to wipe it remotely. Be careful, Bianca. A cornered rat bites. I'm not afraid of rats anymore, Arthur. I'm the exterminator. I drove to the Sterling Logistics headquarters. It was a sleek glass building in the business park. It looked majestic in the morning sun. My father's name was on the sign. I swiped my badge. Access granted. I walked through the silent lobby. The security guard, old Mr. Miller, was dozing at the desk. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Miller," I said. He jumped. "Miss Bianca, you're here early. Is everything okay? I saw the email." "The email?" "The one about the meeting tomorrow. Everyone is talking about it in the WhatsApp group. Is the company closing?" "No, Mr. Miller," I said, patting his shoulder. "The company isn't closing. It's just getting new management." I went up to the executive floor. My office was down the hall from the CEO suite. I walked past Richard's office. The door was ajar. I stopped. Someone was inside. I peered in. It was Kelly, Richard's executive assistant. She was frantically shredding papers. "Kelly?" I said sharply. She screamed and dropped a stack of files. She looked terrified. "Bianca, Richard told me to come in. He said he needed these files cleaned out for the new year." I walked into the room. Kelly was 24, young, naive. Richard probably manipulated her just like he did everyone else. "Stop shredding, Kelly," I said calmly. "I can't. He said if I don't finish this by noon, I'm fired. I need this job, Bianca. My mom is sick." I walked over and unplugged the shredder. "You're not fired," I said, "but you will be if you destroy one more piece of evidence." Kelly started to cry. "He's scary, Bianca. He screams. He throws things. I know about the fake invoices. I had to type them." I put a hand on her shoulder. "You're a witness, Kelly, not an accomplice, unless you keep shredding. If you help me, I promise you your job is safe. In fact, I'll give you a raise." She looked at me, eyes wide. "Really?" "Really. But I need you to give me everything he tried to hide, the physical files." Kelly wiped her eyes. She reached under her desk and pulled out a box. "I didn't shred the originals. I pretended to. I kept them, just in case." I looked inside the box. It was a gold mine. Bank statements from the Cayman Islands, photos of Tiffany with Vegas Mike, and the original power of attorney document signed by Mom. "You're a hero, Kelly," I said. "I'm just tired of him staring at my chest," she muttered. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was a video call from Mom. I answered. Mom's face filled the screen. She looked haggard. Richard was pacing behind her, red-faced. "Bianca," Mom sobbed, "please, just come home. Richard is so angry. He says you stole money from the company. He says he has to call the police if you don't come back and fix the accounts." "Let him call the police, Mom," I said, my voice ice cold. "Actually, tell him to save his minutes. They're already on their way." Richard snatched the phone from Mom. His face was distorted by the camera angle. "Listen to me, you little ungrateful brat," he spat. "You think you can play games with me? I am the CEO. I own this family. You are nothing. If you don't unlock the accounts in 5 minutes, I am going to burn your house down." "It's not your house, Richard," I said, "and it's not Mom's house either. What are you talking about? Check the deed. Phoenix Properties. That's me. You're trespassing. And Richard? What?" Look out the window. I wasn't at the house, but I knew what was happening. I had called Uncle Mike, and Uncle Mike had called his buddies from the biker club to stand guard at the estate until I got there. "Who the hell are those people on motorcycles?" Richard screamed. "Eviction enforcement," I said. "I'll see you in court." I hung up. The web was tight. The fly was caught. Now it was time for the spider to feast. By 10 a.m., the war had moved from the shadows to the public square. I was sitting in Mr. Henderson's office, finalizing the affidavit for the emergency injunction, when my phone buzzed with a TikTok notification. Uncle Mike's video. It had exploded. 2.4 million views. The caption read, "Stepdad of the year shoves working-class daughter to make room for princess. Hashtag Christmas drama, toxic family, karma." I clicked on it. The video was shaky, but the audio was crystal clear. "Get out! This seat is for Tiffany. I said get up, Bianca." The sound of the shove. The crash of the glass. The comments were a river of fire. User 123. "Oh my God, did you see the mom? She just kept eating." Flag, flag, flag. Justice for Bianca. Internet, do your thing. Lawyer up. That's assault. Press charges. Tiffany sucks. Wait, isn't that the girl who posts those fake rich life photos on Insta? That's Tiffany Sterling. The internet had found them. The court of public opinion was in session, and the verdict was guilty. But Richard, in his infinite arrogance, didn't hide. He doubled down. "Check your email," Henderson said, looking up from his laptop. I opened my inbox. From Richard Walsh, CEO, to Bianca Sterling, HR, all staff. Subject, immediate termination for cause. Effective immediately, Bianca Sterling is terminated from her position as CFO of Sterling Logistics for gross misconduct, embezzlement of company funds, and corporate espionage. Security is instructed to escort her from the premises if seen. We are pursuing legal action to recover stolen assets. He fired me on Christmas Day via email, copying the entire company. I felt a flash of anger, but it was quickly replaced by amusement. He had just handed me a wrongful termination suit on a silver platter. He didn't have board approval. He didn't have cause. And technically, since I controlled the legacy protocol, I could prove he was the embezzler. "He's digging his own grave," Henderson chuckled, "but we need to move before he controls the narrative." "Turn on the TV," I said. "Channel 5. I had a feeling. Richard loved the spotlight. Sure enough, there he was. A local news crew was parked outside the estate gates, kept at bay by Uncle Mike's biker friends. Richard had walked down to the gate to give an exclusive statement. He was wearing a cashmere sweater, looking somber. Mom was standing next to him, wearing sunglasses to hide her swollen eyes. She looked like a hostage. "It's a tragedy," Richard told the reporter, wiping a fake tear. "We took Bianca in. We gave her a job when no one else would. And how does she repay us? By hacking our accounts on Christmas? By freezing our assets so we can't even buy food? This is elder abuse, pure and simple. We are the victims here." The reporter thrust the microphone at Mom. "Mrs. Sterling, is it true your daughter assaulted you?" Richard squeezed Mom's shoulder. I saw her flinch. "Bianca is troubled," Mom whispered. "She has always been jealous of her sister. We just want her to get help." My heart shattered into a million pieces. Troubled, jealous. She lied. On national television. She sacrificed my reputation to protect the man who was stealing her blind. "That's it," I said, standing up. The last tether of guilt snapped. "I don't care about Mom anymore. She made her choice." "Here is the injunction," Henderson said, handing me a stack of papers stamped by the judge. "This freezes all company accounts. It removes Richard as CEO pending an investigation. And this," he handed me a second document, "is the eviction notice for the residents." "I'm going over there," I said. "Not alone," Henderson warned. "He's desperate. Desperate men are dangerous." "I'm not going alone," I said. "I'm bringing the cavalry." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had found in Kelly's Do Not Shred box. "Agent Harper, FBI, Financial Crimes Division." It turned out the FBI had been investigating Vegas Mike for months. They knew he had a whale in the logistics business who was laundering money. They just didn't know it was Richard, until Kelly gave me the files connecting the dots. "Agent Harper," I said when she answered, "this is Bianca Sterling. I have the evidence you need to take down Vegas Mike, and I can give you the man who was washing his money, today." "We're listening," a crisp female voice replied. "I'm going to the Sterling estate in 1 hour. Richard thinks he's winning. I'm going to let him think that. I'm going to offer him a deal, and I want you listening in." "You want to wear a wire?" "No," I said. "I want you to be there, but hide. Wait until he signs the confession." "Confession?" "He thinks he's signing a settlement to get my shares, but I'm going to swap the papers. He's arrogant. He won't read it. He'll just sign to get the money." "That's risky, Miss Sterling." "He pushed me down, Agent Harper. He stole my inheritance. He brainwashed my mother. I'm not looking for safe. I'm looking for justice." There was a pause. "We'll have a team at the perimeter. Don't engage physically. Get the signature or the verbal admission and we move in." "Copy that." I hung up. I looked at Henderson. "It's showtime." The drive back to the house was different this time. I wasn't running away. I was returning as the conqueror. But Richard had one last card to play. As I pulled up to the gate, passing the news vans and the bikers, my phone pinged with a legal notification. Served. Civil lawsuit. Plaintiff, Richard Walsh and Eleanor Sterling. Defendant, Bianca Sterling. Damages sought, $5 million. Charges, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, breach of fiduciary duty. $5 million. He was suing me for everything I had, plus future earnings. I laughed. It was a hysterical, jagged sound. He was suing me with my own money. He was using the company retainer to pay the lawyers to sue the owner of the company. The circular logic was dizzying. I honked at the gate. Uncle Mike opened it, giving me a thumbs up. "Give 'em hell, kid," he shouted. I drove up the long driveway. The house loomed, a massive Georgian brick structure that used to feel like a sanctuary. Now it looked like a fortress of lies. I parked right in front. I didn't sneak in the back this time. I walked to the front door and rang the bell. Tiffany answered. She was wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, her makeup smeared. She looked hungover and terrified. "You?" she hissed. "You ruined everything. My cards are declined. I can't even order Uber Eats." "Hello, Tiffany," I said, stepping past her. "Nice hoodie. Is that the one you bought with the pension fund money?" "Shut up! Daddy!" she screamed. "She's here!" Richard appeared at the top of the grand staircase. He looked impeccable again, having changed into a fresh suit. He held a tumbler of scotch. "Well, well," he descended the stairs, acting the lord of the manor. "The prodigal stepdaughter returns. Have you come to beg forgiveness, or did you just come to return the keys before we have you arrested?" "I came to talk, Richard," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I saw the lawsuit. 5 million? Really?" "I can make it 10, he smiled, reaching the bottom step. Unless what? Unless you sign over your 40% and the voting rights. You walk away, Bianca. You leave town. You never contact Eleanor again. If you do that, I drop the lawsuit. I might even give you a small stipend, enough to rent a nice apartment, somewhere far away, like Alaska." Mom walked out of the living room. She wouldn't look at me. "Mom?" I asked. "Is this what you want? You want me to leave forever?" She twisted her hands. "It's for the best, Bianca. We can't have this fighting. Richard says you're toxic to the family dynamic." "Toxic?" I nodded slowly. "Okay." Richard's eyes lit up. "Okay?" "I'm tired, Richard," I lied. I let my shoulders slump. I made my voice tremble. "I can't fight you. You have the media. You have Mom. I just want it to be over." "Smart girl," Richard sneered, finally using that brain. "I have the transfer papers in my car," I said. "I drafted them this morning. Everything you want. I just need you to sign the release of liability so you can't sue me later." "Go get them," he commanded, "and bring a pen, a nice one." I walked back out to my car. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I opened the trunk. I grabbed the folder. Inside were 2 documents. On top, a fake transfer agreement giving Richard everything. Underneath, a confession of guilt regarding the money laundering disguised as a standard indemnification clause appendix. And in the very back of the folder, the eviction notice. I also adjusted the collar of my shirt. The button cam, a tiny lens Henderson had given me, was recording. Agent Harper was listening in the van down the road. "He's taking the bait," I whispered to the air. "We're ready," Harper's voice crackled in my earpiece, hidden under my hair. "Get him to admit to the debts. We need to link him to Vegas Mike explicitly." I took a deep breath. "Showtime," I muttered again. I walked back inside. Richard was sitting at the dining table, the same table where he had pushed me less than 24 hours ago. He was sipping his scotch, looking triumphant. Tiffany was scrolling on her phone, probably deleting her hateful comments. "Here," I said, sliding the folder across the table. Richard opened it. He scanned the first page. "Total transfer of Class A shares, irrevocable, yes, this looks standard." He didn't read the fine print. He was too eager. "Sign here," I pointed to the line. He pulled out a gold Mont Blanc pen. "Wait," I said. "Before you sign, I need to know something, for my own peace of mind." "What?" he snapped, impatient. "Why the mortgage? Why $500,000? Was the company money not enough?" "Huh, you have no imagination, Bianca. The company money is for me. The mortgage money? That was to pay off Tiffany's friends. Vegas is an expensive town." "Vegas, Mike?" I asked. Richard froze for a second, then shrugged. "Mike, Tony, whatever. They all want their cut. Once I have your shares, I can wash the rest of the debt through the logistic shipping routes. We'll be clean in 6 months. So you're using Sterling Logistics to ship what? For Mike? Not what, who, or what substances. Doesn't matter. It's just cargo, Bianca. Boxes on a truck. That's all your father built. A trucking company for boxes. I turned it into an empire. You turned it into a mule, I said. I turned it into a gold mine. He slammed his hand on the table. Now shut up and let me sign. He put the pen to the paper. He signed. He flipped the page. He signed the indemnification, the confession. He signed the third page. Done, he grinned, sliding the folder back to me. Now get out of my house. I took the folder. I closed it. I looked him dead in the eye. No, I said. Excuse me? I said, no, I'm not leaving. I have a signed agreement, he shouted, waving the paper. Actually, I said, standing up and pulling the eviction notice from the bottom of the stack, you just signed a confession to federal wire fraud and racketeering. And this, I slammed the eviction notice on the table. You have 5 minutes. Richard looked at me, confused. Then his face turned purple. You little bitch! He lunged across the table, grabbing for my throat. FBI! Nobody move! The front door crashed open. The patio doors shattered. Agent Harper and 6 agents in tactical gear swarmed the room. Red laser dots danced on Richard's chest. Richard Walsh, Harper screamed. Hands where I can see them. You are under arrest for money laundering, fraud, and racketeering. Richard froze. His hands went up, trembling. The glass of scotch fell from his hand and shattered on the floor. Just like my wine glass. Poetic justice. Note, the actual trap was executed in Part 7, the signing, so Part 8 will focus on the immediate aftermath, the arrest, and the final twist of the mother's realization. The room was chaos. Get on the ground, now! An agent shoved Richard down, his face pressed against the very floor he had shoved me onto. Tiffany screamed, dropping her phone. I didn't do anything. I'm just an influencer. I don't know anything about money. Tiffany Sterling, Agent Harper said, snapping cuffs on her wrists. You are named as the primary beneficiary of the shell corporations used to launder the funds. You're under arrest for conspiracy and tax fraud. But I'm famous, she wailed as they dragged her up. You can't arrest me. Look at my followers. I stood in the corner, watching. I felt numb, but a good numb, like when you finally take off a pair of shoes that have been too tight for years. Mom was sitting in her chair, frozen. She wasn't being arrested. Not yet. She looked at Richard, handcuffed on the floor. Richard, she whispered, what is happening? You said you were investing. Richard twisted his head to look at her. The mask finally fell off. There was no charm left, only venom. Shut up, you stupid cow, he spat at her. If you hadn't been so pathetic and needy, I would have been in Costa Rica months ago. You and your whining. Oh, Richard, love me. It was pathetic. I never loved you. I loved the bank account. Mom gasped. It was a sound of pure devastation. The illusion she had built her entire life around, that she was loved, that she was safe, crumbled in seconds. She looked at me. Bianca? I didn't move toward her. I didn't comfort her. I just looked at her. I told you, Mom, I said softly. I told you 5 years ago. I told you yesterday. You didn't listen. I signed the papers, she stammered, tears streaming down her face. He told me it was for you. He lied, I said, and you believed him because it was easier than believing me. Agent Harper walked over to me. She was holding the folder with the signed confession. We got him, Miss Sterling. This is airtight. Plus the recording,
He's looking at 20 years, minimum. Vegas Mike is already in custody. We picked him up 10 minutes ago based on the files you sent. What about the house? I asked. It's a crime scene for now, Harper said, but legally, it's yours. We'll need you to come to the station to give a formal statement. I nodded. They hauled Richard out. He was kicking and screaming, cursing my name, cursing Dad's name. As they dragged him out the front door, the news cameras flashed. The world saw Richard Walsh in handcuffs. Tiffany followed, weeping about her reputation. Then the room was quiet. Just me, the agents, and Mom. Bianca, Mom stood up, shaky. Where will I go? They're taking him away. I don't know, Mom, I said. Can I stay here with you? I looked around the room. I looked at the table where I had been exiled. I looked at the mortgage papers she had signed. No, I said. Her eyes widened. What? You can't stay here tonight. You signed a mortgage that put this house at risk. You signed a power of attorney that almost destroyed Dad's company. You need to figure this out, Mom. You need to find your own spine. I can't be your anchor anymore. I'm the captain now. But it's Christmas, she sobbed. Yes, I said, walking to the door. It is. And for the first time in 5 years, I'm going to have a silent night. I walked out of the house, past the police tape, past the cameras. Uncle Mike was waiting by my car. He was grinning from ear to ear. You did it, kid, he said, handing me a thermos of hot cocoa. Your dad would be proud. He knew, Mike, I said, taking the cocoa. He knew I could do it. He knew you had to do it alone, Mike said. So what now? You're the CEO. You own the house. You evicted the trash. I looked back at the house. I saw Mom standing in the window, a lonely silhouette. Now, I took a sip of the cocoa. It tasted like victory. Now, I rebuild. And I think I'm going to start by redecorating the dining room. The silence after a raid is heavy. It has a physical weight to it, like a wet wool blanket dropped over your shoulders. For hours, the estate had been a cacophony of shouting agents, flashing lights, and the hysterical shrieking of Tiffany Sterling realizing she couldn't bring her Louis Vuitton carry-on to federal prison. But now, at 3 a.m., the last cruiser had rolled down the driveway. The yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the winter wind across the front door, a garish decoration for the holiday season. I sat on the front steps of the house my father built. The cold stone seeped through my trousers, but I didn't move. Beside me, Uncle Mike was smoking a cigarette, the cherry glowing bright in the darkness. You okay, kid? He asked, his voice gravelly. I don't know, I admitted. I looked at the house. It felt tainted, violated. I feel like I need to scrub the walls with bleach, maybe burn the furniture. We can arrange a bonfire, Mike chuckled darkly, but first you need to see what they left behind. He was right. The FBI had taken the computers, the files, and the safe contents, but the personal debris of Richard and Tiffany's lives was still scattered everywhere. I stood up, my legs stiff, and walked back inside. The dining room was a disaster. The shattered glass from yesterday, was it only yesterday, still glittered on the floor. But it was the office that drew me in. I walked into the room where Richard had played CEO for 5 years. The desk was swept clean by the agents, but the drawers were open. I sat in the chair. My chair. I opened the bottom drawer, the one the agents had ignored because it just contained empty cigar boxes and trash. But I knew Richard. He was a hoarder of small victories. I reached all the way to the back, feeling for a false bottom. My fingers brushed a small, taped envelope. I pulled it out. It wasn't financial records. The FBI had those. This was personal. Inside were photos. Photos of me.
Me walking to my car, me eating lunch alone at the park, me leaving the lawyer's office 3 years ago. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the open door. He had been watching me, not just ignoring me, but actively monitoring me. There were notes scribbled on the back in Richard's handwriting. She suspects nothing. Keep her busy with the audits. The mother is under control. The daughter is the threat. He knew. All this time, he knew I was the only thing standing between him and total domination, and he had kept me close, kept me employed just to keep an eye on me. He didn't fire me because I was useful. He kept me because he was afraid. I felt a surge of validation so strong it almost knocked the wind out of me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I had been living in a shark tank, and I had survived. I walked out to the kitchen. Mom was gone. She had left in a taxi an hour after the arrest, heading to a cheap motel near the highway. She had asked me for money. I gave her $200 and told her not to call me until she was ready to tell the truth. The house was empty, but it was finally mine. I spent the rest of the night cleaning. It was manic, I know, but I couldn't sleep. I grabbed trash bags and started in the living room. I threw out Richard's Scotch collection. I threw out Tiffany's tacky throw pillows. I threw out the hideous modern art statue Richard had bought with company funds, some twisted metal thing that looked like a car crash. By dawn, the hallway was lined with black bags. The physical purge was the first step. At 7 a.m., my phone rang. It was Henderson. "Bianca, turn on the news," he said. "The royal flush just hit the table." I clicked on the TV in the kitchen. The screen showed a press conference. The U.S. attorney was standing at a podium, looking grim. Behind him were enlarged photos of shipping containers bearing the Sterling Logistics logo. "We have uncovered a massive smuggling ring using a legitimate logistics company as a front," the attorney announced. Richard Walsh, acting as CEO, facilitated the transport of counterfeit electronics, narcotics, and untraceable cash for the organized crime syndicate known as the Vegas Network. The sheer scale of this operation is staggering. Then the camera cut to a mugshot. Richard. He looked stripped of his dignity. His hair was messy, his eyes hollow. And next to him, Tiffany. Her mascara was running, her expression a mix of shock and pouty indignation. But it was the next sentence that froze me. "We are also investigating the potential involvement of other family members who may have knowingly benefited from these illicit funds." My heart stopped. Mom. If they could prove Mom knew about the source of the money, if she had signed anything other than the mortgage, she could be charged as an accessory. I grabbed my keys. I had to get to the office. I had to go through every single email, every single memo to see if Richard had framed her too. Because as much as I was angry at her, as much as she had betrayed me, I didn't want my mother to die in a federal prison cell. That was the difference between me and Richard. He sacrificed people. I protected them, even when they didn't deserve it. I arrived at Sterling Logistics an hour later. The parking lot was full. The employees were there, standing in clusters, looking terrified. They saw my car and went silent. I stepped out, taking a deep breath. I was wearing the same suit from yesterday, wrinkled and stained, but I held my head high. "Everyone, into the conference room." I projected my voice across the lot. "Now." They shuffled in. 500 people. Truck drivers, dispatchers, accountants. They looked at me with a mix of fear and hope. I stood at the head of the room. "Richard Walsh is in jail," I started, my voice steady. "He was a criminal who used this company, used us to commit fraud, but he is gone." A murmur went through the crowd. "The FBI is going to be here for weeks," I continued. "They are going to ask questions. You are going to answer them honestly. You have nothing to hide. Richard did this, not you." I looked at Mr. Miller, the security guard. I looked at Kelly, the assistant who saved us. Sterling Logistics was built by James Sterling, my father. He built it on honest work. We are going to reclaim that. No one is losing their job today. Payroll will be met, even if I have to sell my own assets to do it. We are going to scrub this company clean, and we are going to drive again. Suddenly, there was silence. Then, slowly, a clap started. It was Kelly. Then Uncle Mike, who had followed me. Then the drivers. Soon, the room was roaring with applause. It wasn't a celebration of victory. It was a release of tension. The tyrant was dead. Long live the Queen. I walked back to my office, the applause still ringing in my ears. I sat down and looked at the mountain of work ahead of me. The lawsuits, the IRS audits, the creditors. It was a mess, a beautiful, glorious mess. And for the first time in 5 years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The weeks following the arrest were a blur of legal motions and revelations. If Richard's arrest was the explosion, the subsequent investigation was the fallout that poisoned the ground he stood on. I spent more time with Agent Harper than I did with my own friends. She set up a temporary command post in our boardroom. We became an efficient machine. I deciphered the coded accounting ledgers, and she used them to tighten the noose around Richard's neck. But the real entertainment, the dark, satisfying comedy of it all, was watching the united front of the Walsh family crumble. It started 10 days after the arrest. I was called to the Federal Detention Center to give a deposition. As I walked down the gray, sterile hallway, I heard shouting coming from one of the interview rooms. "She's lying. The girl is a pathological liar." It was Richard's voice. I stopped and looked at Harper. She smirked. "He's trying to cut a deal. He claims he was a victim of elder abuse. He says Tiffany masterminded the whole thing." "Tiffany?" I laughed. "Tiffany can't even spell laundering." "He claims she introduced him to Vegas Mike. He says he was just trying to be a supportive father and got caught up in her bad crowd." We walked into the observation room. Through the one-way glass, I saw him. Richard looked 10 years older. His expensive tan had faded to a sallow gray. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with his complexion. He was pleading with the prosecutor. "Look, I have information. I can give you names, but I want immunity. It was the girls, Tiffany and Bianca. Yes, Bianca set me up." The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Jessica, didn't even look up from her file. "Mr. Walsh, we have recordings of you discussing cleaning the cash with Mike. We have your signature on the shell company documents, and we have your stepdaughter's testimony. Save your breath." Meanwhile, in the cell block down the hall, Tiffany was singing a different song. Her lawyer had advised her to plead ignorance, but Tiffany, stripped of her phone and her audience, was desperate for attention. She started talking to anyone who would listen, guards, cellmates, and eventually the investigators. "It was all Daddy," she sobbed on the recording Harper played for me later. "He made me do it. He said if I didn't sign the papers, he would cut off my allowance. I'm a victim. I have anxiety. I need my emotional support poodle." They were eating each other alive. The loyalty they had flaunted at the Christmas table, the smug superiority of the real family, evaporated the moment consequences became real. It was pathetic. It was validating. But amidst this circus, the media storm was raging. The story of the evil stepdad and the hero daughter had gone national. My inbox was flooded with interview requests from Good Morning America, CNN, even Oprah. I turned them all down. I didn't want fame. I wanted my company back. However, the public didn't need me to speak to form an opinion. The internet sleuths had dug up everything. They found Tiffany's old tweets mocking poor people. They found Richard's old yearbooks where he was voted most likely to sell his own mother. And then the creditors came for the scraps. Since I had successfully argued that the debts were incurred through fraud and unauthorized use of company assets, the banks went after Richard and Tiffany's personal assets to recoup their losses. I stood in the driveway of the estate one Tuesday morning and watched the auctioneers arrive. They seized Richard's Mercedes. They seized the boat he had bought and never used. They seized Tiffany's entire wardrobe. I saw a repo man carrying out a stack of Tiffany's designer handbags. "Careful with those," I called out, sipping my coffee. They're evidence of stupidity. The best part? The judge granted my motion to unfreeze the legitimate company accounts, but kept Richard's personal accounts locked tight. He couldn't hire a high-powered defense team anymore. He was stuck with a public defender, a weary man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Richard tried to reach out to me. Of course he did. I received a letter from jail, handwritten. "Bianca, my dearest daughter, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. I was protecting the company, protecting you. Please tell them to drop the charges. We can be a family again. I forgive you for the police. Just get me out. I forgive you." The audacity was breathtaking. I didn't burn the letter. I framed it. I hung it in my office as a reminder of what narcissism looks like in its purest form. But while Richard and Tiffany were imploding, there was one person who was quietly fading away. Mom. She was staying in a small apartment on the outskirts of town, paid for by her sister, who had flown in after seeing the news. I hadn't seen her since the night of the raid. I knew I had to face her before the trial. I needed to know whose side she was really on. I drove to the apartment complex. It was a run-down beige building, a far cry from the estate. I knocked on the door. Mom answered. She looked frail. She was wearing an old sweater I remembered from when Dad was alive. "Bianca," she breathed, her eyes filling with tears. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. The apartment was sparse. A couch, a TV, a small table. "Did you know?" I asked. I didn't sit down. "Did you know he was laundering money?" "No," she shook her head violently. "I swear, Bianca, I knew he was spending a lot. I knew he borrowed against the house. But I thought he was just a bad businessman. I didn't know he was a criminal." I looked at her. I used my CFO eyes, the ones that spot a lie in a spreadsheet from a mile away. I believed her. She wasn't a criminal mastermind. She was just weak. She was a woman who was so terrified of being alone that she let a wolf into the henhouse and handed him a knife. "He's going to prison, Mom," I said, "for a long time." "I know." She looked down at her hands. "He called me. He told me to sell my jewelry to pay for his lawyer." "And what did you say?" She looked up. For the first time in 5 years, I saw a spark of the woman my father had married. "I told him I pawned it all last week to pay you back for the mortgage." I blinked. "What?" "The $500,000, she said. "I know I can't pay it all, but I sent a check to Henderson this morning for $40,000. It's everything I had left. The pearls, the rings, everything except your father's band." I felt a lump in my throat. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. "Keep the check, Mom," I said softly. "The insurance is covering the fraud loss. You're going to need that money for rent." "I don't want his money," she whispered. "I just want my daughter back." "You can't have the daughter you had 5 years ago," I said, my voice trembling. "She's gone. You have me now. And I'm different. I'm harder." "I know," she said. "I deserve that." I left the apartment without hugging her. It was too soon, but as I walked to my car, I felt lighter. The empire of lies had collapsed. The rats were trapped, and the survivors were slowly, painfully, starting to crawl out of the rubble. The trial was swift. Federal cases usually are when the evidence is this overwhelming. It wasn't a question of if they would be convicted, but how long they would go away. The courtroom was packed. It seemed like half the town had shown up to see the fall of the great Richard Walsh. I sat in the front row, directly behind the prosecutor's table. I wore a navy blue suit, sharp, professional, untouchable. Uncle Mike sat next to me. On the other side was Kelly, my new VP of operations. When Richard was let in, the room went silent. He looked small. The swagger was gone. He walked with a shuffle, the chains around his ankles clinking a rhythmic dirge. He refused to look at the gallery. He refused to look at me. Tiffany was brought in next. She looked around wildly, as if searching for a camera crew. When she saw me, her face twisted into a scowl, but she quickly looked away when the bailiff barked at her to sit. The proceedings were a blur of legalese, but the victim impact statement, that was the moment the world stopped. The judge looked at me. "Ms. Sterling, do you wish to address the court?" I stood up. I walked to the podium. I didn't have a prepared speech. I didn't need one. "Your Honor," I began, my voice clear and unwavering. For 5 years, this man didn't just steal money. Money can be replaced. He stole time. He stole memories. He stole the legacy of a man, my father, who worked himself to the bone to build something good. I looked directly at Richard. He flinched. "He came into our home disguised as a savior," I continued. "He preyed on grief. He weaponized a widow's loneliness. He pitted sister against sister. He treated people like disposable assets. He called me just an accountant. Well, he was right. I am an accountant, and I have tallied the cost." I turned back to the judge. "The financial damage is in the millions, but the moral bankruptcy, that is incalculable. Richard Walsh and his daughter didn't just break the law. They broke a family. And they laughed while doing it. They toasted to it with expensive champagne while throwing me out of my own home. I ask the court not for vengeance, but for an accounting. I ask that the sentence reflect the depth of the betrayal." I sat down. The courtroom was dead silent. I saw the court reporter wipe a tear. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on her nose, nodded slowly. "Mr. Walsh," she said, "please rise." Richard stood up, his legs shaking. "In all my years on the bench," the judge said, her voice dripping with disdain, "I have rarely seen such a calculated abuse of trust. You are a predator in a suit. You have shown no remorse, only regret that you were caught." She looked down at her papers. "On the charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering, I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for 20 years. A gasp went through the room. Richard's knees buckled. His lawyer had to grab his arm to keep him upright. "And you, Miss Sterling," the judge turned to Tiffany, "you are young, but you are not innocent. You enjoyed the fruits of these crimes. You mocked the victims. I sentence you to 5 years, and following your release, you will complete 2,000 hours of community service." Tiffany shrieked, "5 years? I can't do 5 years. I have a gluten allergy." The gavel banged. Bang, bang. Court is adjourned. The bailiffs moved in. They grabbed Richard. He looked back then. He looked right at me. His eyes were wide, terrified. "Bianca," he shouted. "Bianca, help me! I'm your father!" I stared at him. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just watched him disappear through the side door. "He's not your father," Uncle Mike whispered. "He's just a bad memory." We walked out into the sunlight. The press was waiting. Microphones were thrust in my face. Bianca, how do you feel? Is this justice? What will happen to the company? Do you have a message for other victims of fraud? I stopped. I looked into the cameras. If you are watching this, I said, and you feel small, if someone is telling you that you don't matter, that you're just a checkbook, that you should sit down and shut up, don't. Stand up. Keep the receipts. And remember, the truth always balances the ledger. I pushed through the crowd and got into my car. I drove to the cemetery. I hadn't been there in months. I walked to Dad's grave. It was clean, the grass trimmed. I knelt down and touched the cold granite. "We did it, Dad," I whispered. "The company is safe. The house is safe. Mom is safe, even if she's unhappy." I sat there for a long time, listening to the birds. I realized then that I wasn't just grieving him anymore. I was grieving the girl I used to be, the soft, compliant girl who wanted everyone to get along. She was buried here too, and the woman who rose from this grave, she was made of steel. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Kelly. "Boss, the stock price just jumped 15% after the verdict. The market likes a clean house." I smiled. "Okay, Dad," I said, standing up and brushing the dirt off my knees. "Break is over. Back to work." 1 year. 365 days. That's how long it takes to turn a haunted house back into a home. It was Christmas Eve again. The snow was falling exactly like it had last year, coating the driveway in a pristine white blanket. But everything else was different. I stood in the dining room. The mahogany table, the one where I was shoved, was gone. I had donated it to charity. In its place was a round table made of warm, reclaimed walnut. No head of the table, no hierarchy, just a circle where everyone could see everyone else. The air smelled of roasting turkey and cinnamon, but this time I was the one cooking. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The doorbell rang. "I'll get it," Uncle Mike shouted from the living room, where he was watching football on the new TV. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked to the foyer. Mr. Henderson walked in, shaking snow off his coat. He looked frail, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "Merry Christmas, CEO," he grinned, handing me a bottle of wine. "Merry Christmas, Counselor," I hugged him. "This isn't the 98 Dom, is it?" "God, no," he laughed. "It's a decent Pinot. Honest wine for honest people." More guests arrived. Kelly and her mom, Mr. Miller, the security guard, who I had promoted to head of facilities, Agent Harper, who had become a close friend, and who was currently dating my head of IT. The house was full of noise, laughter. Real laughter, not the nervous titters of people afraid of a tyrant. "Dinner is served," I called out. Everyone gathered around the new table. There were 15 of us. "Where do we sit?" Kelly asked. "Anywhere you want," I smiled. "There are no assigned seats here." We sat down. I poured the wine. "Wait," Uncle Mike said, tapping his glass. "We need a toast." The room went quiet. Mike looked at me. "To the anchor." "To the captain," Henderson corrected. "To Bianca," everyone chorused. I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the wine. I looked around the table. This was my family. Not by blood, mostly, but by choice. These were the people who stood by me when the ship was sinking. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But I want to propose a different toast." I raised my glass. "To knowing your worth," I said. "To never letting anyone tell you that you don't belong at the table. And to the ones watching over us." Hear, hear. We ate. We told stories. We laughed until our sides hurt. Toward the end of the meal, the doorbell rang again. The table went quiet. I hadn't invited anyone else. I walked to the door. My heart rate picked up a little. Old habits die hard. I opened the door. Standing on the porch, covered in snow, holding a small Tupperware container, was Mom. She looked better than she had a year ago. She had gotten a job as a receptionist at a dental office. She was living in a small condo she paid for herself. She wasn't wearing pearls. She was wearing a simple scarf. "Bianca," she said, her breath clouding in the air. I didn't expect to come in. I just wanted to drop this off." She held out the Tupperware. "It's your grandmother's cranberry sauce. I made it from scratch. I know you like it." I looked at the sauce. Then I looked at her. We had been seeing a family therapist for 6 months. It was hard work. There was a lot of pain, a lot of resentment. We weren't fixed. Maybe we never would be. The trust was a fragile thing, glued back together, showing the cracks. But she was trying. She was standing in the cold, seeking nothing but a moment of connection. "It's freezing out here, Mom," I said. "I know. I'll just go." "Eleanor," I said, "don't be ridiculous." I stepped back and held the door open. "We have an extra chair." "Someone brought a +1 who didn't show up. There's a spot." Her eyes widened. "Are you sure? I don't want to intrude." "It's Christmas," I said. "Come inside." She stepped in. She looked at the renovated hallway, the new art, the warmth of the house she used to rule but now visited as a guest. "It looks beautiful, Bianca," she whispered. "You made it yours." "Yes," I said. "I did." We walked into the dining room. The conversation stopped for a second, then Uncle Mike stood up. "Ellie," he said, using her old nickname, "grab a plate. The turkey is dry, but the wine is good." Mom smiled, a tentative, real smile. She sat down, not at the head of the table, not at the foot, just at a seat, part of the circle. I watched her for a moment. I watched her laugh at something Henderson said. I watched her eat the food I paid for in the house I owned. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't scared. I was just peaceful. I looked at the empty spot next to me. I imagined Dad sitting there, winking. "You did good, kiddo." I took a sip of my wine. Life isn't a fairy tale. The villains don't always disappear into smoke. Sometimes they just go to federal prison in upstate New York. And the heroes don't always get a Prince Charming. Sometimes they get a Fortune 500 company and a really good therapist. And you know what? That's better. Because I didn't need saving. I just needed to remember that I was the one holding the keys all along. Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And subscribe if you want to hear more stories about justice served cold. Until next time.